morning, everybody. How you doing? My name's Chris. I'm from Argonne National Laboratory, which is a great big science lab just down the road, maybe about an hour from here, where they do pretty amazing stuff. We have a lot of scientists and researchers and engineers there who are working on all kinds of advancements, including things to do with proteins and biology. We're working on battery research. How many people here have a cell phone or an iPod or iPad? Wouldn't it be cool if you only had to plug it in once a month? We're working on that. Anybody ever seen the movie Back to the Future where they have the hoverboard? We're working on that. You might have one someday. So there's a lot of great research that goes on there. We have some really fast computers. Right now we have the 5th fastest computer in the world, but we're building what will be the very fastest computer in the entire world, and they're going to have that turned on in about a year or so. Just imagine, if you will, anybody here's got a PC or a MacBook or something like that? Imagine a stack of those reaching all the way up to almost the moon. That's what we're working on there. So a lot of good stuff going on there. So part of my job at Argonne National Laboratory is to help people to communicate better, to tell the stories of what they do, to talk about science and research, but we also have to talk sometimes about a crisis and what goes on. So I kind of wanted to give you a little definition here of what a crisis really is, because it sounds like there's a healthcare crisis brewing right now in this room with this fuzzy stuff, okay? Now, how many people, you're all in school, right? You get textbooks, they give you these textbook definitions, right? Sometimes they're a little hard to read, understand? Yeah? You have trouble with them? Yeah. I like things a little simpler when I do a definition. So here's my definition of a crisis. Something bad has happened. Pretty simple, right? Something bad has happened. Anybody not understand that? Anybody not understand that one? If anybody's got their hand up, we need to go back a grade, okay? So, a crisis means something bad has happened, and it sounds like this fuzzy stuff is kind of a bad thing to happen, right? Here's the thing about a crisis, though, it will go away eventually. Eventually, it's going to end. So that's the good news there. And here's the thing, when we have a crisis going on, we become afraid. It's just human nature. Everybody does it. If there's a crisis of some kind, something bad happening, we get afraid. Sometimes we're a little bit afraid. Sometimes we're really afraid. Sometimes in the middle there. But here's the thing. When you're afraid, your brain doesn't work as well as it normally does. You get scared, you don't think quite as clearly, and so when we want to tell people about things during a crisis, they might not understand it as easily, okay? And here's another thing you might not know. The brain is hardwired to be afraid. If we don't know something, we automatically become afraid of it. Fear is contagious. Did you know that? Yeah. If I were to walk into this room and everybody here is looking afraid, I would automatically become afraid, even if I don't know what you're afraid of, just the way we work. If we're paying attention to something that others are paying attention to because they're afraid, we start to pay attention to it too. So if I start hearing about this fuzzy mud and everybody's afraid of it, I'm going to start paying attention to the fuzzy mud stuff too, just the way we're wired that way. If we think we have control over a situation, we become less afraid. Like if I can go in my room, close my door, so nobody with fuzzy mud's going to touch me, I've got more control, so now I'm less afraid of being infected by it. And people we trust, if they give us information or help us, that also helps us to be less afraid. So your parents, your teachers, friends, if they're telling you things you need to do to protect yourself, they're people you trust, so you're going to trust them. You're going to believe them. And that means you're going to be less afraid too. And here's another thing too. We're more afraid of hazards or crises that are created by other people than we are about natural crises. You all have storms come through the area, right? We heard thunder last night. Anybody hear the thunder last night? Yeah. Some of it was kind of loud too. Windy, rain coming down. Sometimes storms can get really serious and they can be a crisis. but we're less afraid of storms than we are of, say, somebody creating something like fuzzy mud. So natural stuff, we're not as afraid of, okay? And again, that default factor for the human brain, if we don't know, we're just automatically afraid. So if we want to tell people what they can do to protect themselves from fuzzy mud, here's some things to think about. One, because they're afraid, their brain doesn't work as well, we got to make sure that the information we give them is pretty simple. Simple things. Tell them in simple, easy to understand language that everybody can understand, and you want to tell them what they can do. Because if you give people something to do during a crisis, they're going to be less afraid. So maybe you tell them they need to go inside and close the windows and doors, or not shake hands. You know what I'm talking about. We give people things to do when there's a crisis going on. Like how they tell you when you have the flu, you're supposed to cough into your elbow. You're not supposed to like go kiss other people, things like that. Ew, I know, it's gross, right? We also have to repeat those messages too, so people get them and understand them. And sometimes graphics. So what I mean by graphics are drawings or maps. Maybe you create a map showing where the fuzzy mud is and how to avoid it and get away from it. Maybe you create one of those infographics you see sometimes showing how the fuzzy mud can get on a person and what it does to them. So giving them graphics or drawings or maps can really help in communicating things that people need to know. Now here's what people really want to know during any type of crisis. People just want to know 3 things, and that makes it easy to remember. 3 things. People want to know first what the crisis is, what happened, right? You all want to know that. If there's a crisis, you want to know what it is. The second thing people want to know is, how does it affect them? What does it mean to them? Are they in danger? Are they going to get sick? Is there a problem for their family? They want to know what it means to them. And then the third thing people want to know is, what are those people that are trying to help them doing to solve the problem? It may be people in the hospital, it might be ambulance workers, firefighters, policemen, teachers, anybody that's there to help. What are they doing to solve the problem? So 3 things that people want to know during any crisis. What is the crisis? What happened? What it means to the people affected, and how is it being solved, or what are people doing to solve that problem? That's really what people want to know. So if you were going to put together a plan or put together some type of information to share so everybody knows what's going on and can protect themselves from fuzzy mud, you want to get those 3 things in there so everybody knows what's going on, okay? And there is another reason we do this stuff. There's another reason we talk to people and tell them about these crises. We call it psychological first aid. It makes people feel better mentally about it. And that's important because if people feel better about it, they're going to feel less stressed afterward, and then they get back to their normal lives faster. There's no fear, there's no worry afterwards. So if we're communicating with them during a crisis, giving them information, telling them what's happening, telling them how to protect themselves and their family and their friends and their loved ones and their pets and everything, they're going to be less afraid later on, and they're going to recover faster, and life gets back to normal faster. So that's kind of why we do it. One of the things I wanted to point out, though, is we tend to rely a lot on our electronic devices. We're on the internet, we're looking at Twitter and Snapchat and all these other things. A lot of those things don't work during a crisis sometimes. The power can go out. So how do you get online if you got no power? Sometimes the cell signals for your phones get overwhelmed and we can't connect, or we can't text people that we like. So you got to remember, sometimes we need to be able to communicate with people in other ways. How would you do that? You have to think about those things during a time of crisis.